Gemini, how does this person see you today? The stars show the truth. Have you ever caught yourself wondering if someone is thinking about you in a way that words never quite capture? That strange moment of stillness, when your name feels like it's echoing through someone else's silence. Do you feel it too? There's a presence lingering around your energy, a consciousness that hasn't let go of its image of you. You're not imagining it. The universe is whispering back. This message is not about guessing games or wishful thinking. It's about truth, about seeing yourself through the lens of someone who once looked at you with knowing, and who might still be doing so quietly, powerfully from a distance. But what if their vision of you has changed? What if their heart still holds your reflection, but shaped by time, regret, or reverence? Today, we open a window into that unseen space between you and them. We let the stars translate what they picked up on, vibrations, thoughts unspoken, emotions unprocessed. What you discover may comfort you or shake you, but either way, it will bring clarity. If you've been sensing a subtle pull lately, like someone is emotionally circling back into your orbit, this message is for you. If this resonates already, I invite you to subscribe, and stay close. Because what follows is not just information, it's an unveiling of something your soul has been longing to confirm. Gate 1. The memory they can't forget. How you still live in their energy field. Gemini, you may not realize it, but you've left behind an energetic footprint so distinct that it still pulses in someone's emotional atmosphere. Even now, even after the words stopped, even after the distance, there's someone who carries a version of you within them like a subtle echo, a version that feels more alive to them than they care to admit. And what makes this echo powerful isn't just what happened between you, but how you made them feel and who they became in your presence. Let's begin with something that may surprise you. This person doesn't just remember facts about you. They remember frequencies. The tone of your voice when you were excited. The way your energy shifted when you were processing emotions beneath the surface. That playful sharpness in your humor. The sudden stillness when your mind turned inward. These are not simply memories. They're emotional imprints that still ripple through their field like soft waves every time something reminds them of you. And lately, that's been happening more than ever. Gemini, you are a multidimensional being, always both here and elsewhere, both grounded and airy, both the speaker and the silent observer. And that's part of what made you unforgettable. To this person, you weren't predictable. You were alive. You held contradictions so gracefully that they couldn't look away. You were the one who could be light as laughter in one moment and profound as poetry in the next. And while that may have once confused or overwhelmed them, now it captivates them. Now it haunts them. The stars show that this person is revisiting moments with you in their mind. Not the dramatic ones, not the ones tied to arguments or clear turning points, but the small ones. The time you looked out the window and whispered something that seemed insignificant, but revealed your inner world. The way you noticed things no one else did. The way you held space for them when they didn't even ask for it. That's the memory that's grown louder, not because it's new, but because the world feels dimmer without that version of you in it. Here's what's even more fascinating. This person doesn't see you the same way they did when you were close. Back then, their vision of you was limited by what they needed you to be. Maybe they needed you to be steady. Maybe they needed you to stay light. Maybe they weren't ready to handle your depth, so they filtered you through their own fears. But now that time and distance have stripped away the illusion, they're seeing something much closer to your truth, and they don't know what to do with it. The stars reveal a very specific shift. This person no longer sees you as someone who belongs to their past. They see you as someone who transcends time. You become an archetype in their consciousness, the one who saw them clearly before they could see themselves, the one who didn't ask them to be impressive, but simply present. And now, as they confront the spaces in their life where they feel unseen or stagnant, the image of you returns as a reminder of what real connection once felt like. Gemini, you have a way of lighting up people's minds. You challenge them. You make them think differently. But what you may not always realize is that your presence also softens them. It opens up locked rooms inside them they didn't even know existed. That's what happened to this person. They open briefly and then close again. Not because of anything you did wrong, but because what they felt with you was too real, too potent, too unscripted. And not everyone is ready for that kind of emotional velocity. Now, they're left with questions. Do you still think of them? Would you still see through them the way you once did if they stood in front of you now? Are you still the same? The truth is you're not. You've changed. You've grown deeper. Your energy has become more refined, more sovereign. But what they feel is still valid. The imprint you left remains. Only now it's wrapped in a kind of reverence, a kind of quiet awe. This isn't about obsession or idealization. It's about soul-level recognition, the kind that doesn't fade even after silence, even after closure. And while this person may be wrestling with their pride, their guilt, or their fear of vulnerability, the emotional frequency you activated in them hasn't diminished. It's just been buried under layers of noise, distractions, and time. And here's where it gets even more cosmic. The reason this person's energy is reaching you now, through dreams, memories, unexpected reminders, is because you're at a threshold. You're becoming more aware of your own value, more anchored in your truth. And their soul feels that. They're not just sensing you. They're sensing that they may not have access to this new you. And that realization is stirring something urgent inside them, a desire to reconnect, a fear that they lost something irreplaceable, a longing to see you again, not to fix the past, but to be near your light while they still can. Gemini, the imprint you left wasn't casual. You gave something rare, something radiant. And now, the question that hangs in the air is not whether they see you, but whether you're open to being seen again, not through the old lens, but through the clarity of who you become. The stars have spoken. This person sees you not as a chapter, but as a shift in their storyline. Someone who made them question what love, depth, and presence really meant. You live in their memory, not as a role. They play many of those, but as a frequency, one they can't recreate anywhere else. So now I ask you, Gemini, knowing this, how you see them. Gate 2, the emotional mirror, what they feel but can't say. Gemini, if you could step into this person's heart for just one moment, you would be astonished by what you find there. It's not a tidy box labeled feelings. It's a mosaic of intensity, of longing, of unresolved desire mixed with quiet grief. Their emotions toward you right now are not easily categorized. They don't fit neatly into love or friendship or regret. They stretch across all those lines, because what they feel for you is both too much and not enough at the same time. Too much to ignore, not enough to claim. This person is tangled in their own emotional architecture, and your presence, even in memory, pulls them into a place they cannot navigate with logic alone. There's admiration, first and foremost, a kind of reverence they didn't allow themselves to express when you were still close. They look back and realize that you were more than just charismatic. You were sincere, and that scared them, because sincerity is disarming. It forces people to be real. And you, Gemini, you have a way of reflecting people's true selves back to them without even trying. This person remembers how you listen, not just to their words, but to the silences between their words. How you noticed when they were pretending. How you saw the fractured lines beneath their perfect image. That level of perception was intimidating. And even now, they feel exposed by your memory. Not because you judged them, but because you didn't. There is also guilt. It lingers like smoke in their emotional field. Because somewhere along the line, they failed to meet you where you were. Maybe they weren't emotionally available. Maybe they dismissed your depth as too much. Maybe they mistook your honesty for pressure or your curiosity for threat. Whatever the reason, they pulled away, slowly, quietly, maybe even with a smile. And now they live with the awareness that you gave them something real, and they responded with hesitation. They didn't show up fully. And now the silence between you feels like they're doing. And it is. But layered beneath that guilt is something even more potent. Hope. As strange as it sounds, this person still imagines you. Not just as you were, but as you might be now. Stronger, wiser, sharper. They wonder if the door is still open, even a crack. They fantasize about bumping into you and saying everything they never said before. They wonder what it would be like to sit across from you without pretending, to be fully seen again, but this time without flinching. The thought terrifies them, but it also stirs something deeper than fantasy. It stirs the ache for completion. And yet there's fear. So much fear. Fear that you've outgrown them, that you no longer see them, that they've been replaced in your emotional hierarchy. They wonder if they ever had a real place in your life, or if they were always just a passing figure on your way to something greater. And that's the part that paralyzes them, because they know they never showed you the full spectrum of how they felt. They hid behind politeness, behind distraction, behind their own emotional immaturity. And now they suspect, rightfully, that you've moved on, that your heart no longer leans in their direction. And that realization bruises them more than they expected. At night, when the world is quiet, they find themselves returning to the version of you that lived in the spaces between words. The way your eyes searched theirs when you felt something off. The way your energy shifted when they tried to avoid a real answer. They know now that you always knew, that you were waiting for them to catch up. And now they're left with the weight of having never arrived. There's also a layer of envy in their emotional landscape. Not envy in the bitter sense, but in the reverent sense. They see how you've changed. They sense your alignment, your lightness, your inner authority. And they envy the fact that you kept evolving while they got stuck. You grew, you healed, you reclaimed parts of yourself that they were never ready to hold. And now they watch from a distance, energetically, spiritually, wishing they had walked the same road of awakening, wishing they had been brave enough to grow with you instead of away from you. Gemini, this emotional cocktail they carry, admiration, guilt, longing, fear, envy, hope, is not something they can articulate. Not yet, maybe not ever. And that's why the universe is delivering this message to you through the stars. Because their soul is reaching out in the only way it knows how. They want you to know, not through words but through energy, that you changed them, that you mattered, that your presence rewired something in them that cannot be undone. And whether they ever find the courage to tell you this or not, the truth remains, they feel you. Still, they feel your laughter in quiet moments. They feel your absence when life becomes dull. They feel your wisdom when they're faced with choices. You are in many ways a silent guidepost in their life, a reference point for what real connection feels like. And they miss it, desperately. But the question is not whether they feel all this. They do. The question is, can they handle the version of you that exists now? Can they hold space for the new, self-possessed, emotionally sovereign Gemini, who no longer waits for others to see your light? Because here's the truth. They may still love the memory of you, but you're no longer that memory. You've evolved into something more powerful, more magnetic, more discerning. You no longer need their validation. And that, more than anything, is what rattles them now. Because the emotional control they once had by withholding words, affection, or commitment no longer works. You've reclaimed your emotional narrative. And now, they're left with everything unsaid, everything unfelt, and everything unchosen. Gemini, if you're feeling emotionally stirred right now, that's because their emotional frequency is brushing up against yours in the ether. There's still a thread, but only you can decide if it's one worth following, or if it's time to cut it and walk forward fully unburdened. Gate 3. The mirror. What they see in you is what they can't face themselves. Gemini, there's something remarkably powerful that the stars are asking you to understand in this moment. The way this person sees you, intense, complex, at times distant, and at times mesmerizing, is not simply a window into your identity. It is a mirror of their own unfinished evolution. Because every word they've ever said about you, every reaction, every projection, every hesitation, carries within it a message not about who you are, but about what they haven't yet made peace with inside themselves. You see, their perception of you has always been less about truth and more about reflection. And when someone hasn't fully owned their own desires, regrets, strengths, or limitations, they tend to project those unclaimed fragments onto others, onto you. If they saw you as unpredictable, it was because they couldn't predict their own emotions. If they thought you were too much, it was because they were overwhelmed by parts of themselves they didn't understand. If they admired your confidence, it was because they hadn't yet located that voice within themselves. And if they were intimidated by your presence, it was not because you were overpowering. It was because their self-esteem was still too fragile to stand next to someone who shines without apology. Gemini, the stars are revealing something profound. You became a screen onto which this person unconsciously projected their own emotional contradictions. In your freedom, they saw their constraints. In your depth, they felt their shallowness. In your intuition, they sensed everything they had ignored in their own journey. And now, as they look at you from a distance, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, they're not just seeing you anymore. They're seeing all the places where they paused instead of acting, all the moments they stayed quiet instead of speaking their truth, all the times they chose the easy path over the honest one. You have become, without trying, their unspoken standard, and this is why their energy still lingers so heavily in your field. Not because they want to take something from you, but because their soul knows it still has something to learn through your example. This is what we call the mirror effect. It's when your existence, just by being, holds up an honest reflection to someone else's inner landscape. It's not something you do consciously. It's simply how your soul shines when you're aligned with truth. And for someone who is still running from their own truth, that light is both magnetic and uncomfortable. They want to be near it, but they also flinch when it exposes the cracks they've worked so hard to hide. And so they waver. They come close, then pull away. They admire but hesitate. They praise you in silence, then judge you out loud. Because what they see in you activates a confrontation they are not yet ready to have with themselves. But here's what the stars are gently reminding you of now. This is not your burden to carry. It's not your job to make yourself smaller so they can feel secure. It's not your task to adjust your authenticity so they can delay their growth. You are not responsible for how others interpret your light. You are only responsible for keeping it lit. And in doing so, you give others permission to find their own spark. That is the sacred role you've unknowingly played in this person's journey. You became the lighthouse they didn't realize they needed until they got lost. And yes, this person has been lost. Lost in the tangle of who they thought they were supposed to be. Lost in the roles they performed to gain approval. Lost in the noise of shoulds and shouldn'ts. But when they think of you, something shifts. A door opens. A memory stirs. A longing emerges. Not just for you, but for a more honest version of themselves that only seems to awaken in your presence. And this is why they're drawn to you, even if they don't know how to express it. It's why they remember your words long after the conversation ends. Why they compare others to you without meaning to. Why they secretly hope to cross paths with you again, not just to see you, but to see who they become in your reflection. But Gemini, be careful. When someone sees you as their mirror, they may try to define you by their unfinished business. They may see your boundaries as rejection, your evolution as distance, your emotional clarity as coldness. But none of that is about you. It's about what they haven't faced, what they haven't healed, what they haven't dared to become. The truth is, their perception of you has been distorted by their own self-doubt. They've seen you through the fog of comparison, desire, fear, and regret. But now the fog is lifting, and what remains is not a fantasy, but a clear image of who you truly are. Someone who is no longer waiting to be seen, but who sees themselves deeply and fully. And here lies your power, because once you see this mirror for what it is, you can stop trying to fix the reflection. You can stop over-explaining your intentions, over-accommodating their insecurities, overthinking every interaction. You can return to yourself. Oh, unapologetic, sovereign. This doesn't mean you cut them off. It means you stop diminishing yourself to protect their comfort. It means you let them have their awakening, even if it comes through losing you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not be available for someone's projections anymore. Gemini, the mirror is no longer yours to hold. It's time they learn to see themselves clearly without using you as a frame. Because the version of you they remember was already evolving. And the version of you now, she's no longer willing to be anyone's emotional placeholder. You've outgrown their assumptions. And in doing so, you become something both beautiful and dangerous to their ego, a reminder of what's possible when someone chooses growth over comfort, truth over approval, self over performance. Let them see you. Let them misunderstand you if they must. But never again let their perception define your reflection. Gate 4, the conflict. Why they stay silent, yet can't let you go. Gemini, now that the mirror has been held up, Now that the truth of how you reflect something deeper in this person has been revealed, the next layer of the cosmic story begins to unfold. And it is not a simple one, because what the stars show next is not just admiration or longing. It is conflict, internal, unresolved, and quietly tormenting. This person, who sees you with such intensity, who remembers you with such sharp clarity, who feels your absence like a note missing from a melody, they are caught in a silent war within themselves, a war between the truth they feel and the fear they haven't conquered. On one hand, they long to reach out. They think of what they'd say. They replay past conversations and imagine future ones. They remember the way your energy made them feel alive, real, like they didn't have to perform or pretend. They remember the emotional safety of your presence, and they crave it now more than ever. And yet they don't move. They don't speak, because fear still has its grip around their voice. Fear of being too late. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear that they've lost the right to be seen by someone as authentic as you. There's a paradox that's driving them silently mad. They want to be close to you, but they also fear what closeness would require. Vulnerability, accountability, the courage to show up without excuses, to confess what was unsaid, to own the parts of the past they mishandled, and most of all, to accept the version of you that exists now, not the memory they preserved. Because the truth is, Gemini, they're not just afraid of you. They're afraid of the them they would have to become to be worthy of this reconnection. They've seen your evolution. They sense your strength. And while part of them is deeply drawn to the wisdom you now embody, another part feels unworthy of it. So they hesitate. They stall. They rationalize the silence with phrases like, maybe she's better off, or what if I make it worse? But the universe doesn't let us rest when we have unfinished soul business. And so, your name continues to echo in their thoughts. Your essence still lingers in their energy. No matter how much they distract themselves, new people, new projects, new habits, there's a hollow space inside that only your truth ever truly filled. This conflict manifests in subtle ways. They may stalk your social media, but never like a post. They may type and delete messages a dozen times. They may talk about you indirectly to mutual friends, asking how you are, pretending not to care too much, but hanging on to every word. They may even convince themselves that reaching out is pointless until they have a dream that shatters their illusion, a dream where your voice says what they were too afraid to hear in real life, a dream where your presence feels closer than ever. These dreams are not coincidences. They are soul nudges. They are the universe whispering, "It's time." But still they hesitate, because they know that to speak with you now, in the light of who you become, they can no longer bring excuses. They can no longer hide behind half-truths. They must come clean, not just about what they did or didn't do, but about who they truly are underneath the layers. And that kind of truth, it terrifies them, because it means finally stepping out of the comfort zone they built from years of emotional avoidance. And yet, despite all this fear, they can't let you go. Not fully, not spiritually. You are still tethered to them in the quiet places where their mind wanders when they are alone. You are the unresolved line in their favorite song, the memory that triggers tears when they least expect it. You are the what if that has refused to fade with time. And that conflict between wanting to forget and needing to remember is becoming unbearable. What they don't realize is that your forgiveness does not require a perfect speech. Your acceptance never needed them to be perfect. What you always longed for was truth, realness, a sincere voice that didn't hide behind timing or pride. But pride has a way of convincing us that silence is safer than vulnerability. And so, they remain trapped in limbo, waiting for the right moment to speak, a moment that may never come unless they choose it. Gemini, here's where your own clarity becomes essential, because the stars also ask you this. Are you waiting for them to find the courage? Or have you already outgrown the version of yourself that once would have waited? Because yes, they see you as radiant, inspiring, even unattainable. But more than that, they sense that they may not have a place in your new world, not unless they are willing to rise and meet you where you are now. And therein lies the core of their conflict. They want to reconnect, but only if they can still be the one who once knew you well. And they're starting to realize they don't, not anymore. because you've changed. You evolved in silence. And now, the version of you they think about is not the one who would settle for half-hearted connections or delayed confessions. The current you? She demands presence, integrity, emotional honesty, and they are unsure if they can offer that. But the stars say this, and say it clearly. No matter how long they wait, no matter how often they doubt, the energy will not rest until this truth is spoken. The universe is preparing a moment, a window, fleeting but powerful, where the choice will be clear. Speak now, or miss the moment forever. When that moment comes, Gemini, all you need to do is be yourself. You don't need to chase. You don't need to fix. You don't need to predict their actions. All you need is to remain aligned with your truth. And when their fear finally gives way to courage, you will know. The energy will shift. The air will change. Your heart will recognize that the time has come. Until then, you are free to live, to love, to continue becoming. Because their hesitation is not your prison. It is their invitation to finally grow into someone worthy of standing in your light, not as a shadow, but as a soul ready to reflect your truth, not project their fear. Gate 5, the unavoidable conversation, when truth can no longer be postponed. Gemini, there are moments in life when the universe stops waiting, when the energy around us becomes so concentrated, so undeniable, that something simply has to give. That is the nature of what's approaching. A moment that has been circling your life like a silent planet, now finally aligning to cross your path. This conversation, this overdue reckoning between you and the person whose thoughts have hovered just out of reach, is no longer a possibility. It is a certainty, and it is coming not because either of you forced it, but because the truth has matured. It has ripened on its own timeline, and now it demands to be spoken. You may feel the signs before it happens. An unexpected wave of calm that washes over you after days of inner tension. A random song on the radio that feels like a message, a repeated dream, a shift in your breathing when you think of them, not out of anxiety, but readiness. These are not coincidences. These are the subtle rhythms of a universe preparing you to be present, grounded, open. Because when this moment arrives, it will not allow you to hide behind politeness or performance. It will call you to show up as the version of yourself you fought to become. The version who doesn't shrink. The version who doesn't run. The version who doesn't need permission to speak or clarity to feel. And for them, the one who sees you more clearly than they ever dared admit. This conversation is the moment they stop running from accountability, from regret, from longing, from all the parts of their heart they silence in your absence. They will show up changed, even if only slightly. You'll hear in the way their voice falters as they begin. You'll feel it in the way their energy trembles between fear and hope. They won't come with perfect words. They won't have a flawless script, but they will bring truth, raw, unrehearsed, and saturated with the weight of what has gone unsaid. And you, Gemini, will feel your entire body react, not with shock, but with recognition. Because deep down, you've always known this moment was coming. You may have prepared for it 1,000 times in your mind, crafting your responses, envisioning the ideal outcome. But when it actually happens, none of those rehearsals will matter. Only presence will. The truth won't be about details. It won't be about who did what or why it took so long. It will be about the simple, searing acknowledgement of what is. That something between you never finished forming. That something between you never healed. That something between you never stopped speaking, even in silence. What they say may break something in you wide open, not because it hurts, but because it validates what your intuition has been whispering for so long. That your impact was real, that your absence was felt, that your name was not forgotten, and more importantly, that their avoidance wasn't about your worth. It was about their unreadiness. And now they're finally able to face the cost of that delay. This conversation will not be neat. It won't follow a perfect arc. It may start one way and end another. There may be tears. There may be long pauses filled with all the things neither of you can yet name. But underneath all of it, there will be truth. And truth has its own rhythm, its own healing logic. You will know what to say when the moment comes. Not because you've memorized the lines, but because your soul will remember. Because all the pain, all the longing, all the detours and delays have brought you here for one purpose: to release what is heavy and to reclaim what is whole. And perhaps this moment will offer a clean slate. Perhaps it will offer closure. Or perhaps it will simply offer clarity. But whatever it brings, it will be enough. Enough to move forward. Enough to forgive. Enough to let go of the illusions that held you both hostage. The energy of this moment will not be about reopening wounds. It will be about cleaning them, honoring them, finally allowing them to scar and strengthen, not remain open and raw. Gemini, when you look into this person's eyes and see their hesitation turn into honesty, you'll also see yourself. Not the self you were when they first knew you, but the self you became in their absence. You will recognize your resilience, your grace, your growth, and you will realize that this conversation isn't just for them. It's for you, to affirm the journey, to validate the pain, to reclaim your voice. If you've ever wondered whether your silence was noticed, it was. If you've ever doubted that your distance mattered, it did. If you've ever questioned whether your healing had purpose, it has. And now, in this moment of reckoning, all of it will be reflected back to you with cosmic clarity. And so the question becomes, when they finally speak, will you be ready to listen not with the ears of the past, but with the heart of who you become? Will you receive this truth not as a reward or a punishment, but as a necessary piece of your story's unfolding? Because the stars don't bring conversations like this unless they're meant to change something deep, lasting, and essential. And now, Gemini, the choice is yours. Conclusion, the turning point of presence. Gemini, if you've stayed with me until this final moment, it means something inside you has been stirred, perhaps gently, perhaps powerfully, but undoubtedly truthfully. The journey you've just taken wasn't just a reading. It was a mirror, a reconnection, a remembering, somewhere between the silence you've kept and the longing you've carried. Life has been trying to bring you here, to the edge of a moment that can change everything if you let it. You are not the same soul who once needed constant validation to feel seen. You are not the same heart who once feared conflict more than you feared losing yourself. Through each whisper of intuition you've honored, through each quiet decision to choose authenticity over approval, you have been reclaiming something sacred. Your power to live fully as you are, what awaits you now, Gemini, is not another test, not another delay, but a moment of pure reflection, where your presence, your truth, your light becomes undeniable. You will not need to chase it. You will not need to prove anything. Life is coming toward you, with conversations that matter, with eyes that finally see you, with choices that no longer ask you to abandon yourself. And so I ask you, from a place of soul deep knowing, will you choose now, knowing all that you know? Will you speak when it's time? Will you trust the mirror life holds up to you? Will you take the truth and use it as a foundation to build something more real, more free, more yours? If this message resonated with your spirit, if you felt that deep inner yes echoing quietly through your chest, I invite you to share in the comments, not just for me, not just for others, but for yourself. Let your words be a declaration of what you survived, of what you're ready for, of who you become. Because when we speak from truth, we give others permission to do the same. Now breathe, Gemini. The future is closer than it has ever been. You are ready. The stars have confirmed it. And I believe it with all my heart.